Hungover.
You hungover?
I'm a little hungover. Yeah.
You're a little hungover? I'm not too bad. I thought I was earlier this morning, but I had a long work week. And then I had my first I had my first drinking at a pub last night. Like it was like normal people watching the football game and the soccer game for our American audience. But yeah, no masks and stuff. It was strange.
Hey, this is a stupid question because I've been to the UK, but do they still drink the beer warm?
No, first of all, no, they don't. But there's like cask ale, and then there's like keg beer, which we have. But they have like the pint that you pull, so it's got like that's like the English ales where you have like the little lever and you have to pump it out. And I think that's the stuff that was like famously warm. But I never drink that beer, so I actually couldn't attest to it because that beer sucks.
It's actually not good, or
I don't like it.
yeah, you know people that drink it, or is it like an old fashioned thing?
Yeah, it's sort of an old man thing, but American beer culture is caught up over there. So there's a couple good like new breweries there. Camden Brewery is good. That's what I'll drink a lot. Otherwise, it's like Peroni or San Miguel. Guinness, obviously.
I was watching this documentary recently, and it's just like it has this English guy talking from like I think it was like the early 2000s, and he was kind of ripping on American beer. And it is amazing that compared to when we were growing up, we have it's like the real wine of America is craft beer. We
Oh
have
yeah.
really done it right.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. Like Europeans and especially English people love to talk shit about America, as I've mentioned on the show before, I think. And they're just like
Yeah.
they're just kind of wrong. American beer is way better than everywhere else, but like we got better beer, we got better cider, we have better weed, obviously.
Mhm.
We're a superior nation when it comes to brewing.
Absolutely. Oh, that reminds me though. We didn't get a chance to do this last time I visited you, but I really want to drink a yard.
Yeah, I've never seen one. Yeah, a yard of beer, which is funny that they use standard measurement for it. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, a yard of beer is like this long sort of it's not a beaker, but it's sort of this long thin glass that's like 3 feet long,
Mhm.
and it's got like a little what like a round dome at the bottom. So I don't think it can stand on its own. It has to have like a little stand. And yeah, it sort of looks like something like an old alchemist would have. But yeah, I don't. I've never. I think I've seen one like on display in a pub, but I've never actually seen a place where you can get them.
I'm sure being American, we probably couldn't ask. Like we'd need that English skeleton key to get us in.
Yeah, maybe it's like one of those things that Americans think is a thing, but it isn't. I remember when I was in Germany a few years ago in Berlin, and I was hanging out with some Berliner friends, and I called it a Stein, like a beer Stein, you know, the
Yeah.
like the big things that you'd have at like the Hofbrauhaus and stuff, and they were all like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, isn't it called a Stein? They're like, no, like I've never heard that. It's like, huh? We all think it's that. Like,
It kind of like no one really talks about this, but like the German American experience, like relative to like the Italian American and like Irish American and stuff like that, is just as powerful and also just as like misconstructed. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, it's very like I mean, it's a huge German population or like German heritage population, definitely in Chicago.
Yeah, yeah,
But you never really hear about it,
yeah.
which
But it's just like we drink beer steins and shit that like clearly is not representative.
well, they do drink them over there. Like if you go to Munich, like that's what you get. You get a liter of beer.
Mhm.
They have that for breakfast, actually.
Mood.
I mean, not everywhere. Obviously, I don't think people are getting up and having like a bowl of muesli and a liter of beer at their house. Uh, but I remember when I was in Munich like 10 years ago, if you go to like the open market and you have traditional Bavarian breakfast, it is two large sausages, a large pretzel, like a pretzel that like it's a pretzel, but they call it a pretzel. That's like a foot in diameter, and then a liter of beer. And like it is straight up breakfast because they're German. Like they stopped serving breakfast at like 10. But I remember being there, and there was like big, tall, ripped German guys in like full like cycling gear, and they all showed up, and they all had their liters of beer, and then got back on their bikes and rode away.
I guess I just think about dehydration. I feel like that would make me dehydrated. But it's
Cycling,
also very refreshing.
cycling 20 miles and then drinking a beer. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but also very refreshing. So
I mean, there's nothing like it.
they're not drinking IPAs though. It's like a light beer, right, for breakfast.
It's like a yeah. I mean, it's a lager. Well, you know, the Germany has its German beer law, so it can only have 4 ingredients. So there's like light beer and dark beer, and that's it. Which I respect. I love German beers. I think it's just it's a simple good thing.
Hmm.
They're a weird nation, man. I don't understand. All my friends in Berlin like have like amazing flats and like really good jobs, and they never seem to work. Like I never see them working, but they're all much more accomplished than I am, and and like go to raves constantly, and then wake up at 7 a.m. They're all in good shape. They don't work out. I don't understand those people. Like I don't.
It, it, it reminds me of that meme I sent you the other day that was saying how like Protestant work ethic versus like the siesta work ethic or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like work all the time and not.
Well, I mean, the Protestants are ruining the world, and we know this. We've talked about this.
Mhm. I think that's why being in New York. I think that's why being in New York. I've heard this a few times. They like Midwesterners because they think Midwesterners work hard, and I think it's Protestant work ethic.
I suppose so. Not having been raised Protestant, I wouldn't know, but I
Yeah,
guess that's a thing.
Yeah, but you're from Minnesota.
Is that?
Pretty Protestant there.
I
Right?
guess so. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. I don't know, man. Are they Protestant there? I guess so. We don't have a lot of Catholics.
I mean, okay.
Well, because Minnesota is mostly like Swedish and Norwegian, and
I've heard they work pretty diligently there. I think it's close to Germany. Probably enjoy
that's true.
And efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. The Scandinavians are generally efficient people.
Is Iceland included in that? You can give us anecdotes.
That's like technically Nordic.
What's the difference?
I don't know. They're not technically Scandinavia. I mean, they kind of are, but they sort of have their cake and eat it too of that. Welcome, friends. This is Villain for All Seasons. My name is Ben.
I'm down.
Welcome to the show. So, obviously, there's been a lot in the news with what's going on in Gaza, with the ongoing Israeli assault on the Palestinian people, evictions from homes, crimes in the streets. It's just been a really disgusting situation. So we definitely want to talk about that, and we have a wonderful guest for it. And I wanted to say it was kind of funny to me that I was messaging you, Dan, a couple weeks, or like, what is it, last week, and I was saying like, we really need to talk about this. And one of the things that I was adamant about, which is there's always this ongoing script from like liberal elite in the West, and especially Zionists, that you're not allowed to discuss this unless you're some sort of expert, because there's always this veneer of it's this complicated situation, right? It's so complicated. And the thing is, for anybody who's been watching the events unfold, it really fucking isn't anymore. And I was really sick of this sort of pressure to have this like really nuanced approach to what's going on, because I don't think that the situation is terribly nuanced. Obviously, the history is in certain ways, but in certain ways it isn't. So I wanted to be able to speak frankly about it, and not have to be experts. And then Dan messaged me saying we got an interview with Norman Finkelstein. So we do have an expert. So blew that out of the water. Yeah. Anyway, how do you feel about it?
About the interview or about the situation?
About the interview first, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I think I mentioned this in the pre-show, but I was starstruck.
I was starstruck. I was nervous.
Yeah. We actually, good call on having us record right before he came on. We in fact didn't know he was going to come on. I was supposed to call him at 5 and I called him a little bit late and he didn't pick up. He wanted to call at 5 to remind him. And yeah, I called him a little bit late. He didn't pick up. I think I called Norm 8 times. He
Yeah.
has a house phone, which is hilarious. And I had a little bit of anxiety. I'm like, oh fuck, am I gonna get like Norm gonna call the cops on me or something? But yeah, no. So there's audio footage of us kind of waiting on.
Yeah, waiting with bated breath to
Yeah.
see if Norman Finkelstein would give us some of his time, and he did.
Yeah.
And it was a really amazing conversation. And one thing that surprised me about it was more uplifting than I thought it might be. I mean, it's really hard to have a positive look at anything that's going on because it's so just every day you feel so beaten down by the new news coming out, and it was heartening in ways to hear his analysis on it. And anyway, yeah, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about what the situation is at present, especially what's different about this situation compared to, say, the Great March of Return back in 2018 or Operation Protective Edge back in 2014. So we talked about that. We obviously spend a lot of time talking about the Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem, which is the main human rights organization in Israel, both naming Israel an apartheid state and what that means. We also spent some time, as for anybody who's familiar with Professor Finkelstein, he is one of the premier blacklisted academics in the United States, author of many great books. I won't name all of them, but some of the more well-known ones would be Beyond Chutzpah, on the misuse of anti-Semitism and the abuse of history, the Holocaust industry, reflections on the exploitation of Jewish suffering, image and reality of the Israel-Palestine conflict, amongst many more. He was the subject of a great documentary called American Radical, The Trials of Norman Finkelstein. And also famous for going after the one, the only Alan Dershowitz, which we didn't get to talk to him about, but next time we have him on, I want to.
But there is a bit of an Easter egg at the very end about the next time that we're going to be meeting up with Norman. So make sure you listen to the end. It's nice. Yeah.
This story has only just begun.
Yeah, if you can't tell by the book titles and just Norman's history, it is a provocative conversation, but like you said before, very uplifting. And yeah, I felt even teary-eyed near the end. He's a passionate man and has such a unique way of speaking that
Brooklyn as hell.
Yeah, very born and raised Brooklyn, born and raised. I think his parents survived the Holocaust.
Yes, both of his parents were Holocaust survivors from Poland, I believe.
It's amazing how close the Holocaust actually is. I mean, yeah, especially before, I would say, personally, the turn of the millennium, I felt like World War II and all that stuff felt so close. Yeah, I mean, that generation, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is starting to disappear, but yeah. Crazy.
Well, let's not give away any more of the interview, but it really is great. It's definitely my favorite, I think, that we've done so far. But we just wanted to give a little update. So we conducted the interview on Monday of last week, and obviously the situation has continued to evolve since then. So we wanted to just give a little bit of an update on where the situation is now before we jump in there.
Sure. There was a ceasefire announced at 2 a.m. Friday morning. I believe it would have been 2 a.m. I don't know the actual time zone that they're in, but that time zone. Since there has been a flare-up at the Alaska Mosque, which was also the scene of an earlier incident of Israeli forces. I think what did they put in, like smoke grenades, smoke bombs or something?
Yeah, I've got an article here from CNN by Kareem Kader and Ibrahim Daman, and this is from May 21st. Reads, Israeli forces in violent confrontations with Palestinians outside Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque after Gaza's ceasefire. So I'm just going to read the first little bit of this. From Jerusalem, Israeli security forces used stun grenades and rubber bullets against Palestinians outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, where thousands of worshippers had been attending Friday prayers, puncturing a half day of calm brought on by the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. A CNN journalist at the mosque compound said dozens of Israeli officers hit journalists with batons and tried to point rifles at them, calling them, quote, liars when they showed them their press cards. The officers moved on to the compound as thousands of worshippers chanted in solidarity with Gaza and with Palestinian residents of East Jerusalem neighborhood Sheikh Jarrah, where some Palestinian families are facing eviction. I've been following some Palestinian journalists who are posting a lot of stories about this on Instagram, and I mean it's really brutal. And a thing that you should know about these stun grenades that the IDF is trained to fire them at the face because it does more damage. So there's been some pretty harrowing pictures of Palestinians who, you know, have all their fucking front teeth blown out by getting shot in the face by these stun grenades.
I didn't know that.
It's just so fucking grim, and it's a really it's been so disgusting. And I think, you know, we talk about this with Norm too, that I'm thankful at least that, you know, those people on my Facebook feed who would always be like, this is complicated, we need to realize that both sides blah 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 have you know, very tactfully shut the fuck up, because like, yeah, it's just I don't want to hear it from you anymore. You know, I'm hopeful by some of the changes that have happened in the recent weeks, but, you know, I'm not going to say that like all of this is solved or anything. Obviously, it's going to take a long time for some of this to set in, but at least it's becoming a little more gauche to just blindly say, I stand with Israel. The only person on social media I saw who had their like stupid profile picture with like the surrounding that said, I stand with Israel. I looked at this page that I saw and it was like, South African guy. Okay, never mind.
Oh my gosh. This brings up something that I've been thinking about a lot with the conflict, and we do talk about this with Norm, is that it does feel like the first time it's transcended that debate. You know, I feel that it's actually something we can talk about more as a military action than something that is a hornet's nest of like religious and historical tension, right? And something that really stuck out to me earlier this week is there's this Israeli journalist I follow named Noah Landau. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but anyway, she's on the Israeli left. She writes for Haaretz, which if you don't know, Haaretz is it's a left-leaning publication, and the Israeli left goes hard. And Noah was actually recently interviewed on CNN, and she talks about how this is a great moment for the Israeli left in the sense that they can now start to control this narrative, and we can start to talk about this again beyond that debate, that religious or historical debate, and just talk about it as a military debate.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing of I saw Abby Martin, the journalist, was interviewing Israeli citizens like in Tel Aviv. Did you see this?
I haven't seen it, no.
But yeah, I think there's a big difference between what you see in like mainstream media discussion with liberals in America, especially, and like liberals and people on the left in England as well, where, yeah, there needs to be this sort of nuance, and there's like all of this sort of caveats to everything and whatever. And like, if you look at like what's happening in Israel, they're not like playing that charade at all anymore. Like they, you know, they're pretty open about their views, and they're pretty upfront about the fact that this is ethnic cleansing and it is getting the people out of there. Like it's really psychotic and like dark to watch her talk to these normal people in the streets, and they're like, yeah, they need to go back to Iraq or Iran, or like they need to get out. They need, you know, and yeah, we need to bomb them. We need to get rid of them. Like, it's like, this is our land and shit. Like, it's like they're not I think, and that's something that we're kind of cloaked from in the West, because a lot of this stuff, like, and that's a big thing that you see from Benjamin Netanyahu as well, is the statements he will make in English will be very different from the statements he's making in Hebrew. Where there's no veneer over it, like in the discourse in Israel, in the same way there is over here, where there's some sort of like feigned civility or this like feigned sort of diplomatic discussion of it, but they're just like, no, we're getting rid of them. And like, and you've seen that in like a video of that fucking fat asshole who just like went into these Palestinian people's house and was like, this is mine now, call the cops, what are you going to do? If it's not me, it's someone else. That's the prevailing opinion that's going on there right now. And that's why you have fucking pogroms happening all over Jerusalem, and you have Felix Biederman called it Kristallnacht every fucking night, which is what it is. And there's just not really anywhere to hide behind that reality anymore.
Oh yeah, I know. I always talk about him all the time, but that reminds me of this one of these Adam Kurz documentaries. It's about the rise of Bibi Netanyahu, in a way. Mm-hmm. I don't want to call him Bibi. It's Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, anyways, Bibi is a very quaint term, similar to calling them settlers. It's
yeah. I don't know the guy, so
it doesn't seem like a Bibi.
Yeah, no. Anyways, it talks about how that perception was molded by his party, the Likud party, during a lot of the wars that Israel's been engaging in over, tensions in the Middle East, and how with Israel involved, it's become this hardline approach of like, this is how you deal with people. This is how you deal with living in a tough neighborhood, I think is the phrase that's constantly used about like Israel lives in a tough neighborhood, right? And how this kind of political messaging was really, if not manufactured, massaged by Bibi's party. Again, why did I do it again? Netanyahu's party. And I think that you kind of see it in the aftermath of this. I think his popularity has risen in the polls after going through 4 defeats in parliament recently. I don't know if you've been following Israeli politics at all, but like they don't have a standing government. They do. It's kind of like a government as default because they keep having to have elections and no one can compromise. So it seems like the effect is happening again when they get into these conflicts. It's beneficial to the right wing. But that's not unique to Israel at all.
Yeah, and can you remember who the name of the guy who's challenging him for the prime minister role?
The Benny Gantz, right?
Yeah, Benny Gantz. Benny Gantz, and then there's another guy. The opposition parties. Yeah, just a thing on Netanyahu specifically, like, and Netanyahu is a fucking psychopath, right? Like that guy is clearly just he's a ethno-nationalist, racist, genocidal fucking leader, and he needs to be gone. But one thing that I think is a little bit of a red herring in the discussion of this, and I believe Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed for something talking about the Netanyahu government, which is like, yeah, he should go, but that won't fundamentally change the situation. Like I don't like this. Like, it's sort of like what happened with Trump, of like where all of America's woes became a product of Donald Trump, when really it was much more systemic problems that had existed long before. And I think the same thing goes for what's happening in Gaza right now. And Netanyahu is, and it's also really easy, especially for Americans on the left, to blame Netanyahu for it because he had his, insane address to Congress trying to undermine Barack Obama. I mean, he, cozied up to Donald Trump. He actively was like campaigning against Obama.
Yeah.
And like he really made himself a villain, like, tied himself to the Republican Party, which is its own problem, right? Like we'd be furious if any other world leader was doing that. If Emmanuel Macron was coming over and trying to like speak before Congress and shit. People would be like, get out of here. We don't want you here. What's going on? But yeah, so Netanyahu's sort of this boogeyman, and like let's remember that like Benny Gantz is also a right-wing psychopath who wants to exterminate Palestinian people, and which again we get into this with Norm, but like the issue is that it's an apartheid state, and getting rid of one politician isn't going to change that situation at all. In the same way that a ceasefire doesn't actually improve the life of Palestinian people in any long-term sense of the word, other than the fact that they're not getting actively bombed and kicked out of their homes and beaten in the streets and having their shop windows broken, and having like asshole settlers coming in and stealing their land and then walking around their neighborhoods with machine guns strapped over their shoulder. Did
Bernie have any takeaway or proposal for solution on that op-ed?
Oh, I didn't read it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine he would go so far as to call Israel an apartheid state. He might. He's been pretty forceful on the issue.
He might. Everybody else did. I mean, come on, ladies and gentlemen, John Oliver said so. And if John Oliver says so, we must follow.
I know you're joking, but I do think that is a measure of public opinion.
Oh, absolutely. No, I was surprised to see that from him, because I don't watch his show. I have before. I kind of like, I mean, I think of all the late night people, he's the most tolerable for me. Not from his politics, but from his like, he actually writes jokes and stuff. But yeah, that is actually like a really big thing to have one of the most popular late night hosts, who also has had some pretty questionable segments, when he's talked about Venezuela and other things like that. Like, it's still very neoliberal mindset. So to hear him call Israel an apartheid state is it's substantial. It's not something to ignore.
Something that's bothered me since the ceasefire is Biden claiming credit for everything. And I've done my research, because they keep saying, oh, there was this like kind of silent diplomacy that was happening behind the scenes. I can't see this as a win for him.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like any kind of like peace deal, it was 11 days. It was terrible. I think they inked that, they're trying to push through that arms deal to Israel.
Yeah.
At the same time. Coincidence maybe, but just really not a good look. And I mean, how could you not just come out and say, no, we're not going to send that right now? It's just.
Yeah, well, that's never going to happen unless there is like an absolute, I don't know what would make that happen, but that's not going to happen. And we talk about this with Norm too a bit. I thought he was maybe a little more charitable to Biden than I would be.
Yeah, it really was.
It's pretty elemental Biden administration, right? It's like going to do the bare minimum of what you have to
I
pander to the masses. And it's like, yeah, that I mean, also like anytime people are saying, oh, well, this is just what they're saying publicly, but like behind closed doors, like never believe any of that. That's never true. Like, there are things you're not hearing about behind closed doors, and I can guarantee you they're worse than whatever you would like it to be. There's no time where like politicians at the highest echelons of power are like having closed door meetings that are like, that if we heard about them, we're like, oh, that's way better than I thought it was. That's great. I didn't know they were doing this for us. Like talking about Biden like he's your fucking secret Santa. It's like, that's not that's not the case, guys. It's not the case. Yeah, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but it makes me think of like the thing with Andrew Yang, because Andrew Yang obviously tweeted out in support of Israel. What was it, last week, 2 weeks ago now, which was just like really grotesque and really just heartless. And he tweeted out that stupid solidarity with Israel statement. I mean, he is running for mayor of New York. I could see why he's trying to court that vote. I think it was, I assume it really wasn't anything other than that. And also, just so everybody knows, Andrew Yang's not progressive. So bear that in mind when you get to voting. in New York mayoral elections. But there was a big outcry, rightfully so, against him because he's a huge figure. So what he says actually does mean something, even though he is not elected. And you had like the likes of AOC going after him, and I'm glad she did. But it was also like, hey, why don't you like point some of that indignation at your fucking boss, someone who can actually do something about this? And there are people in Congress who are, speaking up. Rashida Tlaib gave a really moving speech about this. And then
Confronted Biden on the tarmac.
Hmm? Yeah, spoke to Biden on the tarmac. Did you see any of that shit, by the way, when he went to Detroit and he was going to like test drive a car?
I saw the joke that he made about running over a journalist.
That was
about Israel-Palestine.
I think it says something though about the state of affairs with mainstream media. Oh God, he's there in his fucking aviators. The freeze frame is fantastic.
Great story on the side here. Wyoming senator discloses impregnating 14-year-old girl at 18. I don't know if you heard about that story, but he compared it to Romeo and Juliet. Their age.
Yes. That
old yarn.
Yeah, two star-crossed lovers in Wyoming.
Anyways, wait, hold on.
So basically he was like, he just said he's not going to answer any questions on it, which is, par for the course for Biden. He's just doesn't want to answer anything to anyone ever, nor does his White House. But yeah, so a reporter asked him, first of all, a White House reporter said, "Can I ask you about Israel-Palestine?" And it was like, I'm sorry, what the fuck is your job? You don't ask permission to ask him a question. You're a goddamn journalist. And then he said, not unless you step in front of you and I can run you over or something. And like, which is just, I don't know. It's probably like, who even knows if Biden really was aware where he was or what he was driving. But yeah. And then all the rest of the White House press corps was all like, kind of like chuckling at it. And it was like, yo, do your jobs. Like, this actually isn't cool. And then, so Rashida Tlaib did have some sort of discussion with him that we don't know much about. And then when he was giving a speech later, he brought it up. First of all, repeatedly called her Rashid, like 5 or 6 times. He's like, Rashid, you're a fighter. I'm pretty sure Rashid's a man's name. And even if it isn't, it's not her name. One of the most famous Congress people in America. You can't even, like, very classic Biden. But then also, like, you're a fighter, all these just bullshit platitudes of like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to make sure your grandmother's safe in Gaza. And it was like, you can actually do quite a bit. Stop blocking UN resolutions, get a ceasefire happening faster, don't have a fucking arms deal. So, I think it is sort of much ado about nothing in a perverse way of this is just a depressing situation, but those words do mean something. And it's like him saying that, like, I'm going to do anything, like as much as I can in my power is a way of saying I'm going to do nothing unless I absolutely have to.
I don't want to be misunderstood about the arms deal situation. Like, clearly the US does support Israel more so than it does, I guess, the Palestinian side, if that's the way we characterize it. Sending weapons into, there's no deficit of weapons in the region. And especially in that situation, as we've seen by the various images and video from the event, I think a simple pause would have really sent some shockwaves. I really think it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and well,
this does not mean that like there's no commitment to defense by the
and I'm more extreme. I don't think we should be giving them anything. They're like, and this is one of those hackneyed arguments that people like Zionists will make, or like people on the right will make this a lot too, or and liberals, probably not people on the right, but yeah, people bring up this like, well, you like, why are you talking about this so much and you're not talking about the Uyghur population in China? And it's like, well, first of all, my tax dollars aren't bankrolling that. So actually, if you're an American, this is sort of an especially personal issue because billions of our billions of dollars of American money actually go to directly funding this ethnic cleansing apartheid state.
I think it's worth pointing out too that money goes to the Palestinian Authority, and technically I guess like Palestine opinion is divided between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. If you had to put them in two camps, it's probably more complicated than that. In fact, I'm sure it is. It's weird that we spend money on opposing sides, and in my mind, it's literally destroying peace efforts.
Yeah,
it's a waste of money at the most cynical.
Well, it's a very complicated region, Dan. We can't just, it's complicated, and Israel has the right to defend itself.
Again, it's just been so strange to be able to see so much of this debate happening beyond that religious and political, not political, sorry, but just that religious and historical context. It's refreshing to an extent, yeah.
Which again, like the religious and historical argument is such a bunk fucking argument in the first place. Like it has no fucking bearings. I'm sorry. It's like our ancestors were there, 1,500 years ago. These people have been there the whole other time, but like now it's ours again. It's like, that's a flimsy argument that wouldn't work anywhere else.
I do not believe any voting bloc is monolithic, and I follow a lot of Israelis and I follow a lot of Jews in America who are my friends, and a lot of them have spoken out against the actions of Israel on this. I mean, they feel comfortable doing it, which is huge. I mean, I'm not going to mention my personal friends, but look at even like Katie Halper.
Yeah, Katie Halper is a really good voice for it. Felix Biederman from Chapo is a really good voice for it. The people at TrueNon podcast. I actually don't know if they're Jewish, but they talk about it. No, yeah, Brace is Jewish. I think. Shout out. Anyway, it's good to have those voices. But again, going back to like, I don't like this culture that it really has been this for a lot of years. Like I remember when I would bring this stuff up back in like 2018, 2014, there is sort of that, well, it's like, you're not Jewish, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's like this sort of like, you're not allowed to speak on this issue unless you're Jewish is something that has crippled the conversation in really detrimental ways, because it's this thing of like, how could you understand? And it was like, well, I don't understand like a lot of, your personal experience, but you could say that for literally everybody on earth. But at the end of the day, like using the A word again, I know what apartheid is. I know what it looks like. I know what, people getting dragged out of their cars and beaten. I know what soldiers shooting people with stun grenades in the fucking face looks like. And I'm sorry, like I do feel like I'm qualified to speak on that just because I, like to think I have a sense of humanity.
This brings up something that we actually talk about with Norm, which is the impact of movements like Black Lives Matter and racial injustice movements, and the effect that has clearly had on this debate. I think that we probably live in a culture that is, I don't want to say probably, we live in a culture where we see those images coming out, someone getting hit in the face with a stun grenade or any kind of injustice, that it is triggering, and it really becomes almost a black and white debate.
Yeah, and you have to really, it's so commendable of like the leadership of and what Black Lives Matter has been in the States and abroad, of that they see, like they're very clear when they speak about this, or people who support that movement, people who are within that movement are very clear that their struggle is our struggle, and this like not separating, not saying, hey, we're just dealing with policing in America, saying no, if there's injustice happening here, this is actually the same situation. Yeah, I think it's totally true that I don't think there would be the appetite, definitely in American discourse, for this in the same way had Black Lives Matter and other similar movements not really kind of laid the groundwork, especially for our generation. I think for our generation and younger generations. By our generation, I mean Gen X, the lost generation. I'm just kidding. We're not Gen X. Fuck them.
we should talk about Gen X at a different time because
We should.
they feel like the
Yeah.
middle child, I think, and
I feel like they get a free pass a lot. Like, I feel like, there's a lot of anti-boomer stuff, and rightfully so, but then Gen Xers just sort of get to like fly under the radar, and they're doing shit too.
we should talk to Tom Handishagel about this.
Yeah.
A lot of opinions.
Tom, get back on the, yeah, let's talk to a generation expert or something.
Yeah, again, I think this is a important for the Israeli left, and I'm really cautiously optimistic that a debate can happen within the country, within Israel, I mean. And I know that's like reaching and maybe not exactly what we should be talking about or could be talking about, but yeah, I mean, after seeing Noah's interview and I read her piece in Haaretz, I got some chills, man. There's a big moment there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I am, it is uplifting to see that at least it's in the public forum in some sort of way right now. I hope it doesn't fizzle out. I hope people keep talking about it, keep posting about it, keep being angry about it. Because that's the only way anything really changes. And there's a lot to be angry about. So keep it up.
So we have some in the chat here that our producer Joe, shout out to Joe.
What's up, Joe?
It said, as of 20th May 2021, the Palestinian National Authority reported injuries for at least 1,900 Palestinians, while as of 12 May, Israel reported 200 injured Israelis. As of 19 May, at least 72,000 Palestinians have been displaced. Something to note, these are just the reported numbers by one side and the other. So again, the shame of this is like it's the fog of war. We'll never know the real toll. And this happened over 11 days. 72,000 people have been displaced. I mean, in a way, that's been more powerful than the number of people killed to me.
Well, and think of that 72,000 out of 2.1 million. I mean, that's not a small percentile.
No. And it reminds me of something that I don't know if he was the first one to say it, but George Galway always talked about how every time you would drop a bomb in Iraq, you're creating 1,000 new Osama bin Ladens. I just think the hearts and minds war is just really being lost here, and just so many missed opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, and I just wanted to have an update on the dead. So as of 2 days ago, it was at least 232 people killed in Israeli air raids, Health Ministry says. The Gaza Ministry of Health has said that at least 232 people have been killed by Israel's military campaign, including 65 children. The number of wounded is more than 1,900. So, and yeah, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right, is that we have these staggering numbers, which are their own absolute tragedy, but the ripple effect of pain and anger and displacement and misery that's going to come from these and has come from them before, we're just going to keep, the world's going to keep reaping the rewards of that for the rest of our lifetime.
I think something that I read that was really shocking was they're discussing reconstruction efforts. Mm-hmm. And usually reconstruction efforts are contingent on Hamas somehow getting rid of their arsenal of weapons. And they related this to reconstruction efforts in the past and how basically they barely even started because disputes over, getting rid of your arms arsenal or, finger pointing about.
Well, and why would they? Why would they give up their arms? I wouldn't. No one else would. There's this, this is this ongoing fucking narrative that is absolutely insane. And why are these people held to a higher standard than any of us would hold ourselves to? That's something that this is part of the liberal media discourse of this. And they're well, it's terrible that they're firing rockets. And I'm starting to not agree with that anymore. I was what the fuck else are they gonna do? And Norm talks about this better than I do, but it was yeah, they fucking should do that. It's the only bargaining chip they have. every other nation on earth would do the same goddamn thing. So why are we expecting them to be these like Zen-like figures who just like accept their oppression with some sort of, I don't know, some sort of like quiet dignity? Like that's an insane thing to ask.
Mhm. Yeah, I cannot wait for listeners to hear Norm end on that note. It is one of the most passionate explanations. I can't believe we interviewed him. I'm
Yeah,
so psyched. Like I said, I was
yeah. Don't
starstruck from
let's
the
not bury
second
the
film we
lead
did.
anymore. But yeah, I was very nervous. He's very intense man. He's very
Yeah,
he's very nice though. He's very nice.
yeah, we even
Just
made some jokes and stuff. Like it was good.
yeah, yeah. But I was scared of him at first.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
I'd like to get to the interview, but I thought before we do so, we should also mention that we have 2 episodes left after this, correct?
mhm.
And then we are taking
Not ever.
what's that? Of
Just
the oh yes, of the season. We're the fun thing about podcasts that I like is that seasons can kind of be whatever you decide they are.
mhm.
Is there an average season life for podcasts? It could be like 50, it could be 10, it could be, I mean, I don't know. So we're going in a nice round number, 16, because we need a break.
But we're also going to be doing some coverage of the New York mayoral election.
Yeah, we will be back. We'll be back for that. So
Season 2 is usually my favorite, by the way. I think seasons 3 can be very strong. I mean TV, but
oh yeah, hopefully we won't have a sophomore slump. I think we're just
yeah.
I think we're gonna get better. Come back with the coverage of the mayor election. Andrew Yang is going to join us and talk about Israel more, and also a lot about crypto. I think I want to talk to Yang about crypto.
Before we go into Norm, have a surprise. I have a gut reaction. So,
Oh, all right.
God, do I have so many to choose from? I'm really excited. First of all, I'm just going to share them all, I think. But here, I'm going
How
to.
many are there?
All right, look at your phone.
Diego Maradona, 7 people charged with homicide after shocking investigation. Bombshell news out of Argentina, where 7 people have been charged with homicide in the death of soccer legend Diego Maradona. Maradona passed away back in November from heart failure.
When I first read that headline, I thought it was going to be like, oh, we actually found his body like Goodfellas style chopped up or something. But it's kind of more like a Michael Jackson.
Okay, someone was messing with his pills.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I was thinking like, is this going to be like a Jamal Khashoggi sort of thing?
Yeah.
Bones on. So for anybody who doesn't know, Diego Maradona is like a soccer legend pre-Lionel Messi of Argentina. He's like the national hero, thought by anybody from Argentina to be like the greatest soccer player ever. Football to our British fans. I don't know. That sucks.
Okay.
Why'd you? That's not a fun gut reaction, man. That's just
Okay,
sad.
okay,
Why did you
all
do
right.
that?
Okay, let me try. Okay.
You're gonna tell my Argentinian friends they killed
Yeah.
Maradona.
Okay, try this one.
Okay, well, this is great. Fox News contributor Charlie Hertz says a horse is to blame for his badly bruised face. I'm gonna call bullshit. I don't know.
Yeah, like it's
Okay, so there's a picture of Charlie Hurt, and he has a black eye.
Love that his name is Hurt, by the way.
Yeah, that's pretty funny too. Yeah, he just looks like he got rocked in the face by like someone punched him.
You know,
I mean, I assume it wouldn't be the horse like kicking him because that would fucking kill you.
well, that's what I was gonna say. It's like my fiance,
We've all seen Mad Men.
Yeah, my fiance works with horses, and that would kill you for sure.
Yeah, like a horse. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he was brushing the horse and it like bucked up its face or something. I don't know. I don't think so. I think he was, I don't know, annoying somebody at a bar and just got fucking rocked. I don't believe it.
I got 2 more.
Okay. Seinfeld writer says Kramer would be a believer in both QAnon and Antifa.
Gut reaction.
Was that like Larry David?
Well, I think Larry was George, right?
Well, but Larry David wrote it. I mean,
No, yeah, I don't think that was Larry David who said
it
that.
was yeah, because I think Larry David has better things to do.
Yeah.
Um, I think first of all, who cares? That show was on like what, like 23 years ago?
Yeah.
Also, I don't think you can be a believer in Antifa. I mean, I know it's not an organization in that sense, but it's not like those are two very different things. QAnon's like global conspiracy. Antifa's like a, I don't know, loose movement.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like how would that have worked in action?
Oh, Joe's got a gut reaction for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me read this one. A major retailer used to sell muskets online. It stopped after a shooting death in Ohio. The city called Bass Pro Shops and its subsidiary Cabela's to halt internet sales of black powder firearms shows that even ardent gun sellers are rethinking their operations. And the is great. It's like
Wait, so you can go to a Cabela's and you can buy a fucking like long barrel musket?
uh, have you ever been to Cabela's?
I mean, it's huge. They have everything.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, there was one that had a rock climbing wall, so you could like go there and,
That's amazing.
or maybe that was an REI.
Probably an REI, yeah.
Yeah, that would make more sense, wouldn't it? Bass Pro Shop is a subsidiary of Cabela's last year. Quietly stopped internet and telephone sales of antique-style revolvers and muskets, closing what gun violence experts said had been a loophole for people with felony convictions to illegally buy firearms. So they're saying, wait, I got to get the rest of this. The move came after a 2016 shooting death in which an Ohio man who was legally barred from possessing a gun was able to buy a replica Civil War era revolver over the phone from Cabela's. He later used it to shoot and kill his neighbor, according to a lawsuit filed by the neighbor's family. Cabela's has instituted sweeping reforms to its marketing and sales practices to keep black powder guns out of the hands of individuals with a violent history and others prohibited by law from possessing a gun, said Jonathan Lowy, a lawyer from the family and chief counsel for Brady, United States Against Gun Violence, a group that favors increased regulation of gun purchases. This is great. I like this on multiple reasons. It's like, I love that that's like a bridge too far
Yeah.
for for Cabela's. It's like okay, we're gonna keep the high magazine AR-15s and stuff, but these muskets. First of all, well, actually, I'm jumping ahead. Like, first of all, the fact that you can go to a Cabela's and buy a fucking musket.
I'm sorry, I keep seeing this scene in my head like a Looney Tunes sketch. Like I imagine they both walked in there at the very end and the guy has like the black powder all his face and they both sit around on one another.
Oh, I was thinking of the Simpsons where it flashback to Mr. Burns where he's got a musket and he's making a hobo dance where he's just like has to load the whole thing and he's like, puts the powder in and puts the whatever it was. They're not bullets, but the metal ball, and then has to like pump it in and he's like dance and he's like and then like loads it again. I love that this was like, I love that like there's it's such a non-issue, like what is this becoming endemic of people with like Civil War era firearms just out on crime sprees? Like,
I love the idea of the journalist like making this like a date conversation. Just like, yeah, I wrote about this like musket sales in a Bass Pro Shop, and yeah, I think it's really gonna have an impact. They're gonna not have,
or like like Aaron Sorkin style newsroom conversation of like, we got to get to the bottom of this. Musket sales are on the rise, people, and no one's talking about it. There's a man dead in Ohio right now because a pellet hit him in the chest and sunk in, I assume, an inch and a half because it couldn't get through his fucking breastplate. And then he died of heart disease. Like,
well, just because we have good momentum right now, I'm gonna send you my last.
I just love the idea of like, what if you're like a kid working in a convenience store and someone comes in to rob you with like a long rifle musket? Like, because have you seen those things? They're like, first of all, they can only shoot like 20 yards or something, I think.
They're
And
also
the
like
bear,
8 foot long, right?
yeah, the barrel has to be like 6, 7 feet long because they're so fucking inaccurate so that you probably can't hit a target anyway because the technology is 200 years old. Like, and it's also kind of funny that when people talk, like people who, I think sort of the lazy argument against the Second Amendment from people who are, anti-Second Amendment are like, well, when they made that law, they had muskets and like it'd be fine if it was just muskets and stuff. But now it's high-powered assault rifles, and it's like now you're giving fuel to the fire of gun nuts, being like, they want to take our muskets too. It's not anything. I want to buy a musket, actually. I think it'd be fun to shoot if
Yeah, I
I
think you have to
trusted
like,
it.
hang it over your mantle or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I want to. Yeah, like if you've got trouble outside, coming out with a musket, go on, get.
Right. Like grab it with one arm or whatever. But
Yeah,
you can't. They're so fucking long.
yeah,
You have to have your child hold up the barrel, I think.
yeah. Well, unless you're Daniel Day-Lewis,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he knows how to handle a musket.
Okay, so I'm sending you the last one. I think I saved the best for last. So
Okay,
let me know what you think.
musket one was pretty good. Okay, so this is from Mediaite. Seth Rogen says Tom Cruise once tried to sell him and Judd Apatow on Louis Farrakhan. He's great. What?
Hold on, I gotta pull up the article because I want to.
Yeah, could we get? I need more context on this. Does Farrakhan have any connection to Scientology? He can't, right?
Seth Rogen and Judd Apatow once had an odd encounter with Tom Cruise, which included the Mission Impossible star raving about Louis Farrakhan. The bizarre event is detailed in Rogen's new collection of essays, Yearbook, which includes an anecdote about him and Apatow visiting Cruise's home to discuss the possibility of collaborating on a project. The meeting took place in 2006.
Here, thank you, Joe. The actor raved about Louis Farrakhan, blamed, quote, the pharmaceutical industry for his nutty public image, and offered a lecture on Scientology. Wait, so did he blame the pharmaceutical industry, or sorry, did he blame the pharmaceutical industry on Tom Cruise's nutty public image or Farrakhan's?
No. He said Big Pharma made you jump on Oprah's couch. That's a quote. Because it happened right after Cruise was, I guess, had the couch jumping thing on Oprah.
Right.
And he goes, Cruise insisted that the footage had been edited to make it look so much worse. They do that all the time. You should see what they do to my friend Louis Farrakhan! Exclamation point. From this jumps ahead, but from there, Cruise went on to maintain that the media was misrepresenting Scientology in a similar way. They make it seem so fucking different than it is. If you just give me an hour to tell you about it, you'd be like, no fucking way. That's what Scientology is? No fucking way. In just 1 hour, I could completely change your minds.
I don't doubt that. I think that's why I wouldn't want to get the pitch from Tom Cruise. He's very compelling. Yeah. I'm sure he probably could convince me. Oh man, I wish it was. I wish he did think it was a conspiracy that Big Pharma was after Louis Farrakhan.
Yeah, I mean he probably.
I mean they might be, right. They're like I wouldn't really be surprised if I found out Big Pharma was like pulling the strings against kind of anybody, you know.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be bombshell news to me.
Tom Cruise did dance on Oprah's couch, I remember, but I'm sure that was probably edited to make him look crazy.
Well, yeah. I mean, he didn't need the help, but yeah, that was when he was marrying Katie Holmes, right? He was just jumping up on the couch.
Yeah, I think he was like, I'm so in love with her or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's the thing. He's a pocket rocket. He's a tiny man with tons of energy, and sometimes you just gotta get up and jump on a couch.
Can you do a Tom Cruise impression?
Can I do a Tom Cruise impression? I don't think so. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What movie would you want it to be from? My choice is Magnolia.
Magnolia. Yeah, everyone talks about Magnolia. I would go Interview with a Vampire.
Oh, great choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that movie.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, Tom Cruise is fantastic. And friends with Louis Farrakhan. You know, also, not that I'm surprised, but we do talk about Louis Farrakhan an odd amount.
I think more than half of the episodes we talk about.
He's a big part of our lives for some reason.
Norman Finkelstein episode 14 of Villain for All Seasons. Thank you for listening in. Definitely, if you're going to listen to any episode, this interview with Norman is awesome. So stay tuned. Hey, this is Dan.
Oh, and this is Ben.
We are Villain for All Seasons. Today we are speaking with Norman Finkelstein, and he's going to talk to us about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and everything that is going on at the moment. So, Norm, welcome.
Thank you.
And Norman, I just wanted to kick things off with your explanation of what is happening.
When you say what is happening, if you can be a little more specific, because now it's a kind of a week into it, and there are many aspects of what's happening. So maybe you could just focus on what aspect you'd like me to talk on.
Certainly. I would say, can we talk about what kickstarted the events that are happening in Palestine?
Fortunately, in this particular case, what kickstarted them are pretty straightforward because they were part of a long-standing sequence of events which were closely documented. There are families in East Jerusalem. Israel was slating to evict them from their homes. It's part of a long-standing process by the State of Israel beginning in 1967 to what's called Judaized Jerusalem, that is to say, to turn Jerusalem into a city with a Jewish majority. And the way to turn the city into the Jewish majority is pretty straightforward. You dispossess the Palestinians and you replace them with Jewish settlers. And what was happening at Sheikh Jarrah was a pretty commonplace event in not just the occupied territories, not just occupied East Jerusalem, but it's a commonplace event in the history of Israel. And I'll get to that in a moment, but just to situate what's happening right now. The families in East Jerusalem who were slated for eviction, they were middle-class families. They seem to have had reasonable connections. And so there were demonstrators, including Israeli Jews, who were out there trying to, opposing the evictions from their homes of these East Jerusalem families. The police came in and acted quite brutally to try to break up the demonstrations in support of the families. The brutality then spread to Al-Aqsa Mosque, where Israel first tried to limit the number of worshipers who could pass through Damascus Gate to pray during Ramadan in the mosque. And then at some point, it invaded the mosque and it attacked the worshipers in the mosque. So there was a spillover from the Sheikh Jarrah demonstrators to the mosque. It was on Ramadan or during Ramadan. And then the attack on the worshipers occurred during the highest holy day of Ramadan. And that then triggered a reaction from the Islamic movement in Gaza. And there has been since then, as every one of your viewers and listeners knows, there's been another one of Israel's periodic murderous assaults on Gaza, which is ongoing as we speak.
And I wonder, Norman, so at the time of the recording right now, we've got from Washington Post said 212 Palestinians have been killed, 61 of them children, 36 women. Obviously, by the time this airs, I imagine it'll be quite a bit more than that. And I wonder if you have an analysis on why you think the public outcry against it, especially in the U.S., is there something different about public opinion of this instance that would separate it, say, from 2018 or 2014?
Yeah, something has changed. There's no question about that. It's very visible in its many manifestations of the change. Let's first get to the why, and then we can discuss the manifestations. It is a complicated question why this happened, this change in public opinion, a kind of sea change in public opinion. I would say there are two factors. The first factor is the human rights organizations, the critical human rights organizations, have now shifted their position on Israel and the Palestinians. A few months ago, the Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem, which is the leading Israeli human rights organization for the occupied territories, it issued a report. I have a report. Let's see if I can just get it quickly. Give me a half second.
Sure.
I'll just read you the title, not the text, just the title. The title of the report is A Regime of Jewish Supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, : This is apartheid. A regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, : This is apartheid. And that's a remarkable headline for three reasons. One, they're no longer confining themselves to just the occupied Palestinian territories, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza. Up until now, the paradigm, the template, whatever you want to call it, has been Israel's here, the occupied Palestinian territories are there. Israel, we accept as it is, more or less. The issue is the occupied Palestinian territories. The desired outcome is two states, Israel here, occupied Palestinian territories become a Palestinian state, and that was called the two-state solution. But now something new is happening. They're no longer talking about Israel here, occupied Palestinian territories there. They're saying there's one state. It's one state. They're no longer talking about Israel's more or less fine as it is. Now the Palestinians need a state. It's now saying it's one state and the whole state is problematic. The whole state is problematic. It's saying this state is built on Jewish supremacy. That's a problem. And then they take the next step and say, this Jewish supremacist state is an apartheid state. That was crossing the Rubicon when B'Tselem did that. And then last week, Human Rights Watch put out a report. B'Tselem was the main human rights organization in Israel monitoring Israeli crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories. Human Rights Watch is the main human rights organization in the world. It also happens to be, its headquarters is the United States. And it put out a report. And the report said the whole region, again, from the river to the sea, the whole region is a state based on, they didn't use the expression Jewish supremacy, they used the expression Jewish domination, which is not much different. And they said that in the occupied Palestinian territories of this state based on Jewish domination, Israel is committing crimes against humanity, which he described as, quote, among the most odious crimes in international law. It said Israel is committing the crime of persecution, which is a crime against humanity, and the crime of apartheid. So apartheid came up again. Not a B'Tselem, but now it's Human Rights Watch. So you had that element, a totally new, they are recasting the paradigm. It's no longer Israel, more or less okay, and now we need a Palestinian state. It's now saying we need something with the Palestinians, however, Israel not okay. Israel not okay. And then we had in the United States the past several years the Black Lives Matter movement. And that sensitized the public, in particular the Democratic Party, to issues of white supremacy, which was associated with Donald Trump, and white domination. So now along come these human rights organizations amidst this highly sensitized public to issues of racial domination and racial supremacy. Along come these Human Rights Watch reports that say Israel is a Jewish supremacist state based on Jewish domination, and it's in fact, not in effect, in fact, an apartheid state. Well, that became a lethal brew for Israel. Now everywhere, because I've been attending the demonstrations, everybody's saying the A word, Israel apartheid. No, listen, I know this ambiance, this milieu inside out. I've been part of it for a half century. I'm embarrassed to say, or sad to say, or maybe proud to say, I don't know which. I never heard anything like this. It's kind of flabbergasting what's happened. That everybody's saying Israel apartheid and nobody's disagreeing. So we're in a new ballpark. We're in a new ball game. No question in my mind about it. You see it everywhere now. When I started out in the 1970s, there were a handful of supporters of the Palestinians. We would march down Fifth Avenue in New York. And we would chant really stupid slogans like, everybody should know we support the PLO. Dumb slogans, especially if you're Jewish. That was just not a particularly enlightened slogan. And I remember when I would walk down the streets, I'm dead serious. I was terrified that we were going to be shot. I was terrified there'd be snipers and we would be shot. This past weekend, I went to a demonstration in support of the Palestinians. There were thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people in a little neighborhood in Brooklyn. I'm serious, it's called Bay Ridge, a little neighborhood in Brooklyn. It was all 20-year-olds. It was exactly the same crowd that came out for the George Floyd demonstrations, the anti-police brutality demonstrations, exactly the same crowd. No, it was more Arabs. Obviously, it was probably, let's call it 60% Palestinian Arabs, and 40% were not. They were all 20-something. It was so festive. I mean, it was angry, but also festive. The flags everywhere, the young people climbing the poles to hoist the Palestinian flag at the traffic lights. The cops were standing right there, didn't stop them. Nobody stopped them. That's half the story. The other half, which is even more amazing, it's even more amazing. In the past, whenever Israel came under attack, which of course is nonsense, but whenever Israel came under attack, there would be 1 million Jews bust in from everywhere on Fifth Avenue in a rally in support of Israel. All the politicians would come to, make their little support or give their little speech in support of Israel. Well, guess what? We're now a week into the conflict. This is New York City. There hasn't been one demonstration in support of Israel. Not one. It's breathtaking what happened. Nobody wants to defend apartheid, It's very sobering what happened. And it's quite an amazing feat by the state of Israel. It's an amazing feat. It belongs in the Guinness Book of World Records. How a country managed to unite the whole world to hate them. Yeah, it's an amazing feat. They got what they deserved. So arrogant, so obnoxious, so self-righteous. The way they browbeat, intimidate, scared everybody into submission, trying to quiet them. They're stupid, playing the Holocaust card, and then the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism, trying to muzzle everyone, quiet them. And you know what? For a while, I thought they were winning. Are you from the UK or the US? I can't remember now. Where are you guys from?
We're both from the States.
Oh, okay.
I live in London, but Dan lives in New York.
Right. It looked like they were on a roll in the UK.
Yeah.
They had Jeremy Corbyn on the defensive, disaster in the election. They were Sturmer, or I prefer to call him. Der Sturmer was purging the whole Labour Party. They were forcing Oxford, Cambridge, all the universities to embrace the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which basically means you can't criticize Israel. That's the essence of the definition. They were on a complete roll. I thought they were going to win this juggernaut. And now, total disaster for them. Total disaster.
Norm, I had a quick question for you. Since we're talking about Brooklyn specifically and just the New York wider area as well, Cuomo and the BDS movement, how do you feel about that?
I don't want to get into, not that I'm in any way opposed to your question. People have the right to ask any question they want. I don't want to get into an argument about BDS right now. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, BDS is a cult. Now, I've had a lot of experience in politics. I'm not a young man anymore. And I started when I was about 16. That was when people got started in politics in my era. It was the 1960s, and politics were all around you. And it was not unusual for high school students. I wouldn't say I was typical, but I also wouldn't say I was completely aberrant. So I've been around the block for a half century now. And I know what a cult is. A cult is when you have a guru, when you have mantras, when you have chants, when you have slogans without content, when you have no political analysis. It's a cult. And in my opinion, BDS degenerated into a cult quite rapidly, by the way. So I wouldn't have any truck in it for a very simple reason. I'm too old to be a groupie, and I'm too old to be a cult member. It's demeaning at my age to be a member of a cult. It's for young people to join cults. But when you see a person my age, grade, joining a cult, it looks a little bit silly. So I'm not going to join a cult. I'm not going to. What were those pants called that were shaped like this?
Bell bottoms?
Yeah. I'm not joining a cult at this age, and I'm not putting on bell bottoms.
Fair enough.
Or a paisley print shirt. So, but in principle, we should be clear about principles here. The Human Rights Watch, in its most recent report, A Threshold Crossed, it did support sanctions against Israel. It even called for freezing the assets of Israeli officials who come abroad if they're involved in the apartheid regime. It called for all sorts of punitive international measures in order to compel Israel to abide by the law. So I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem with organizations which, in my opinion, have what you might call, well, let's just put it this way. When I was in my early 20s, I was a Maoist. And I'm not about to go through that phase again. So I don't like gurus. I don't like mantras. I don't like slogans. And I do believe in thought. I study hard, try to analyze, and try to understand. I don't want to just go around. In the 1970s, it was, everybody should know I support the PLO, and now it's BDS. It's a mantra without a content. That's my opinion. But I don't think it's right now at this moment, I don't think it's an important question. The important question in my mind at this moment is, we're in a moment of flux. We're in a moment of transition. The way the conflict was hitherto conceived is now rapidly being rendered obsolete. it was not, I should have made the point, which I forgot to, but now it came back to me. You asked what caused this change, this sea change, and you correctly said as compared to 2018 during the Great March of Return and 2014 during Operation Protected Edge. I left out one element because I was asking a lot of young people at the demonstration I attended in my borough. I asked them, what accounts for the change? I was around in 2018. There were no demonstrations at all. There was nothing. There was zero here, zero. I was there, I know, it was zero. I asked, and one young woman, she was Jewish, she made the point that she said, I grew up in all the Holocaust stuff, Holocaust in the morning, Holocaust in the afternoon, Holocaust in the evening, Holocaust in summer camp. She said, I grew up in that kind of environment. And she said, when you see these Jewish guys breaking the windows of Arab stores, what do you think? What can, what else can you think except Crystal now? So that was another element. But what was critical about that element was it was inside Israel.
Right.
The whole paradigm was Israel's fine. The problem is the occupied Palestinian territories. But now these pogroms are happening inside Israel. So that too forced a change of how we perceive the conflict. So, as I said, we're in a moment of flux now. I don't know what's going to congeal, and I don't know how long it's going to take to congeal. But the old formula has now been rejected by Israel's main human rights organization, by the main human rights organization in the world. And when I say the main human rights organization in the world, I'm talking about an organization which is not radical. Human Rights Watch is a very centrist, mainstream organization with strong ties to the Democratic Party. So it means the change has penetrated all the way into regions, sectors of the Democratic Party. So it's a new ball game. I don't know what's going to come. I don't think anyone knows. We're in that moment of flux and transition. So right now, people are going. I'll have to see how people reconfigure their thinking. But I don't want to sound too haughty about this, but I put the emphasis on thinking. You have to think through these things. You have to study them. You can't just use a slogan or a mantra to solve this question. And so I recognize the past is past. Something is changing now. I see it, and I have to adjust to it. Even at my ripe old age, I have to adjust to it. But I'm not going to rush to any hasty conclusions. I want to see where things go, and then I'll decide how to proceed.
Well,
and it's new.
On that note, this may be an unanswerable question, but so as we obviously sea changes in the world of social media and stuff with public opinion can happen quite fast, and I feel like by extension, then politics has to change a little faster. In certain ways, it does, at least, because there's a certain level of immediacy that's expected. But I wanted to ask you.
I want to just, if you don't mind, of course, I want to hear you out. I would just say we should be cautious about using the expression happens fast. It happened very slowly, and then it manifested itself.
Yeah.
But, when I was in communication with my old friend, we're both now old friends, Professor Chomsky, and I was commenting to him over correspondence, this change, this sea change, and he said, yeah, he's not in a position to be active in the public anymore, but he said he's been receiving all of these emails and videos and he's watching what's happening. And he wrote back to me and he said, and I'm quoting him, he said, I seem to remember somebody writing a book after Operation Protective Edge titled, This Time We Went Too Far. And that was the book I wrote. Already, you might remember, especially the fellow Daniel from London, you might remember, how old are you guys? You're in your 30s or your 20s?
30.
30. 2007 is already a while ago. It's already 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Or I should say 2008-9, Operation Cast Lead. But during Operation Cast Lead, it was a turning point. There was a huge, massive outpouring against the Israeli massacre in Gaza during Cast Lead. It didn't yet yield any fruit. It began the process. And then as your name, Daniel, and your name is?
Ben.
As Ben pointed out, 2014 and 18, it was very quiet. But then the process that began in 2007, it combined with those other elements, the Black Lives Matter, the civil eruptions inside Israel, all the shift in the position of the human rights organizations, and now it burst forth. Everything was slowly accumulating, and there were some setbacks, and now it's burst. The tide has burst the gates. And not a pretty picture for Israel. Not a pretty picture. That country is now despised.
So then do you see the world of academia catching up with where public opinion and politics are right now?
Look, academia is a very strange place. You're in New York. Are you associated with academia?
I'm in London, and yes, I am.
I don't know the British academic scene, but in the United States for the past, you would say 10 years, Palestine has been a very chic issue in academia. It's a strange phenomenon because on the one hand, it's been very radical chic. On the other hand, the Jewish lobby has been putting a lot of pressure to sanitize debate on Israel-Palestine. So if you're in London, you know the IHRA, and it's been the same thing here. So you had two things happening at once. On the one hand, the two big acronyms were BDS and BLM, Black Lives Matter and Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions. Those were the radical chic, you would call it, not litmus tests. All right, let's just for now call it litmus tests. You had to support BLM and BDS in order to be a certified radical academic. But on the other hand, yes, there were consequences for speaking out because the Jewish organizations were applying a lot of pressure from behind the scenes. So you had two things happening. Now, I would say in regions like academia, a report like HRW's has, the Human Rights Watch, has a lot of authority among liberals. When Human Rights Watch says Israel is committing crimes against humanity, among the most odious crimes in international law, including the crime of apartheid, it will be very hard. And you know, academia is a liberal place politically. I guess the ratio is something like 5-1 Democrat versus Republican. If you look at the polls, what percentage vote Republican versus Democrat? I think it's something like 5-1. It's a liberal place. And in liberal sectors, the HRW, before I was referring to the radical chic, but then there is the liberal sectors of academia, which are substantial. Radical chic is what, 10 or 20%. They're mostly in flaky majors, comparative lit, ethnic studies, what other, gender studies, the flaky majors. But then there is the hardcore, serious majors, and they tend to be liberal. And when you now have the authority of Human Rights Watch, it will force a shift. And you have to keep in mind a very potent shift, because you're calling Israel an apartheid state. And Human Rights Watch did something else. It called into question the whole idea of a Jewish state. It did. It said this state is built on trying to, quote, I'm using their words, engineer a Jewish majority, at the expense of the non-Jewish population. And they said that's inherently discriminatory. And it said that the second pillar of this Jewish state, the first was the Jewish majority. The second was the expropriation and confiscation, illegal, of Palestinian land in order to make space for the Jewish majority. And they said that cannot be reconciled with international law. So Human Rights Watch crossed two Rubicons. Number one, it said Israel is practicing apartheid in the occupied Palestinian territories. But number two, which I consider bigger in the great scheme of things, they questioned the whole legitimacy of a Jewish state. It never said, of course, Israel doesn't have a right to exist as a state, but it did question whether Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. Now, you guys are young. You won't remember in 1975, when the UN had this resolution before the General Assembly, Zionism is racism, that was denounced by the entire liberal mainstream community as being an outrage to say Zionism is racism. That was a huge event, the 1975 UN resolution. Well, guess what happened? 2 weeks ago, Human Rights Watch said, for all practical purposes, it said Zionism is racism.
Norm, I wanted to talk about.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable what happened.
I never thought I'd see it.
I didn't. I was shocked. I mean, I'm reading the pages and I'm thinking, do they realize what they're saying here? And you know what? I'll tell you the truth. I'm not sure. I'm not sure they fully realized it. You see, B'Tselem, its position paper limited itself to the present. It said, this is what Israel does. This is apartheid. Human Rights Watch did something altogether different. It went back to 1947. And it said from the get-go, from the day Israel was created, in fact, before Israel was created, this idea of trying to create a Jewish majority in that state and confiscate land in order to accommodate the Jewish majority, they said it's not reconcilable with international law. Did they realize they were saying Zionism is racism? I don't care for buzzwords, not my thing. So I never used the phrase Zionism. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the topic, and frankly, I have a material stake in it because I never got a job in academia. So all I got is that dissertation. So far be it from me to want to discard its historical significance, but I am discarding it. I never used the term. But for practical matters, that's what they did say, the Human Rights Watch. It said Zionism or its practical manifestation. The Jewish state as Israel proceeded to create it. The practical application of the idea of Zionism. They said it's racist. It's based on Jewish domination. Now, when you say a state is based on Jewish domination, you're saying it's racist. So it was, I never expected to live to see it. I was shocked when I saw it. And I don't know where things are headed now.
Norma, I wanted to bring up what Biden has said about the recent conflict. And it's reviving some old thinking about Israel has the right to defend itself.
Mhm.
I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
I want to say two things about Biden. First of all, Biden's heart's clearly not into this thing. He has a domestic agenda. He wants to be a new Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He wants what they call, the term they use now, he wants to be a transformative president. He doesn't want to be dragged into the Israeli rabbit hole, and he doesn't want to be dragged over the precipice. On the other hand, it's a Democratic Party administration. He operates mostly in foreign policy, on default, on reflexes. So he just repeats the same line. Israel has the right to defend itself. And I would say, if you were to ask me, I have no basis for this speculation. I would say, based on the statements that have been made, Biden has been telling the Israelis, he's basically telling them the following. Number one, I'm giving you a free hand, except for two caveats. Right now, Biden is saying, I'm holding off 14 members of the Security Council for you. They have tried 3 times to pass a ceasefire resolution, a ceasefire statement. I've blocked it. So he says, I'm holding off the 14 for you. However, he tells them, if you commit a massacre, I'm out of it. I'm not going to support you. You're on your own. I'm not going to block you, but I'm not going to support you. That's the message, in my opinion, he's saying. So, Israel bombed the AP Al Jazeera building. And yesterday, Israel said, we presented our smoking gun evidence to the US administration and they accepted it. Blinken, the Secretary of State, he was asked, did you see the evidence? And he said today in the press conference, he said, well, I didn't see any evidence. Maybe the intelligence agency showed it. It was a very significant statement. He was saying, I'm not going to lie for you. He didn't say it directly, but he said, well, I didn't see the intelligence agency. Well, of course, if there was real evidence, he would have seen it, or he would have been told. So basically, he was saying, I'm not going to stab you in the back, but I'm not lying for you. You're on your own. And secondly, he was saying they told the Israelis, any major bloodbaths, like killing 100 people at a time, the kind of thing that explodes in the headlines, he says, I'm not going to support you. And then I have to go along with the 14 other members of the Security Council. So I think that's the position the US is basically. It's not surprising. I mean, it's Biden, who's been a stalwart supporter of Israel his whole life, and he's not about to change, and he frankly doesn't really much care. He's an old guy, probably puts in no more than a 4 or 5 hour working day at this point, and he's focused on domestic matters. He doesn't want to be dragged. There's no love lost between him and Netanyahu, because he remembers when that obnoxious Jewish supremacist racist barged into the Congress
Yep.
during the Obama term when he was the vice president and carried on, like they usually do, the Israelis, like Netanyahu has to come to tell us the truth about Iran. Like, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on defense in our country. A large chunk of it goes to intelligence. And we need the Israeli geniuses, the Ubermenschen, to tell us what we don't know because we're not as smart as they are, the way these people carry on. So he has no warm memories of Netanyahu. I'm sure he would be very happy if this whole thing blows up in Netanyahu's face. But it's the reflexes, the default. Israel has the right to protect itself. If you look at Operation Protective Edge 2014, what did Obama say? I have a chapter in my book on Gaza. The chapter is called Israel Has the Right to Protect Itself. That's what I always say. But I think behind the scenes, it's a little different. That's why I don't agree with people who say there's no difference between Trump and Biden. There is a difference. Trump was a pyromaniac. Wherever he saw a fire, it was an opportunity for him to pour kerosene on it. That's not Biden. Biden is, you get a free hand, but there are limits. Limit number one, no civilian bloodbaths, or I'm not going to stop the Security Council from making a statement. And two, you're on your own. We're not going to lie for you. You said we received smoking gun proof that it was Hamas intelligence in the building. No, we didn't receive that. We're not going to say it. We're not going to say it. So Blinken, like any good cagey diplomat, he says, well, I didn't see any information. Maybe some other people which is basically saying, you're liars, and we're not lying for you. As to the other question, and then we'll leave it off if you don't mind, guys, because I'm an old man and I need to get my old man rest because I've been doing interviews all day yesterday and today. The other question is the right to defend yourself as a legal or moral principle. And I'm going to try to give you, normally I would give a long answer, but I'm going to give you a succinct answer. I'll try to, though it's hard for professors to be succinct. It takes them a half hour to clear their throats before they start with the bullshit. In 2003, an Israeli sociologist, a quite prominent and respected one, his name was Baruch Kimmerling, he wrote a book about Ariel Sharon, who was the prime minister at the time, his term of office, his tenure of office. And at some point in the book, he came to Gaza, it was 2003, and he described Gaza as, quote, the world's largest concentration camp ever. Now, that was, as I said, 2003. Gaza, the Gaza that we know now, what Kimmerling described was a pale comparison in misery, because the blockade of Gaza was imposed in 2006. It was imposed because of those, what Jimmy Carter called those free and fair elections, where the people of Palestine elected the wrong government. They elected the Hamas government in the parliamentary elections. That's when the blockade was imposed on Gaza, that brutal, illegal, immoral, criminal blockade of Gaza. Now, Gaza is a tiny sliver of land. It's a sliver of land. That was redundant, tiny sliver of land. It's a sliver of land. Which of you is from New York?
He's lived there though as well.
Okay, so you'll understand my frame of reference. You both know how long a marathon is, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Gaza in length is smaller than a marathon. A marathon is 26.2 miles. Gaza is 25 miles in length. Both of you have been in Central Park, right?
Yes.
Central Park stretches from 59th Street to 125th Street. It's about 3 miles. Gaza is 5 miles in width, so it's a little less than 2 Central Parks. So fix that in your mind. It's a marathon in length. It's roughly 2 Central Parks in width. Now, who's in Gaza? You have this hermetically sealed place. A medieval blockade has been imposed on Gaza for 15 years, since 2006. A medieval blockade has been imposed on Gaza. Who's in the blockade? Gaza is 2.1 million people. It's among the most densely populated places on earth. Half the population is children. They're under the age of 18. Gaza is a child population. 70% are refugees, and children are refugees. Palestinians who were expelled from Israel when it sought to create its Jewish majority in 1947 to 9 by expelling 90% of the indigenous population. A large part of it ended up in Gaza. So we have in this sliver of land a marathon in length, 2 Central Parks in width, among the most densely populated places on earth. We have 2.1 million people, more than half of whom are children, 70% of whom are refugees and descendants of refugees. Because of this medieval blockade, half the population is unemployed. Among young people, it's about 70% are unemployed. 80% of the people are living off of humanitarian aid. 96% of the water in Gaza, 96%, is unfit for human consumption. The children are being poisoned by the water. That's a fact. Now the poisoning is going to increase. I hate the word exponentially, but now it will increase exponentially because Israel destroyed all the electrical generators in Gaza and the waste management system. So the whole of Gaza now is flooded with sewage in the last couple of days. You'll see there's an article in The Guardian on it, I think. Yeah, pretty sure in The Guardian today on it. So that's Gaza, okay? Now, the question is always asked, does Israel have the right to defend itself? Doesn't Israel have the right to self-defense? Practically speaking, what does that mean? It means, do concentration camp guards have the right to self-defense? That to me is the question. Do concentration camp guards have the right to self-defense? I've read the Fourth Geneva Convention. I didn't see anywhere there it said concentration camp guards have the right to self-defense. I didn't see anything there that said under international law, you're allowed to confine 1 million children in a concentration camp. I don't even, to be perfectly candid with you, I can't even make sense of that question. Israel is not defending its sovereignty. That's not the issue. Israel is defending its right to confine 2 million people, of whom more than half, 2.1 million people, of whom more than half are children, in a concentration camp. That's what it's defending. It's defending its right to incarcerate 1 million children in a concentration camp. That's the only, I'm not being hyperbolic or poetic. That's factually what it means. It's not defending its sovereignty. It's defending its right to preserve and protect a concentration camp. I think that's frankly insane. I have a very high regard for Human Rights Watch. Now, I didn't before. Now, I have a very high regard for Bernie Sanders. I campaigned for him in 2016 and 2020. I have a very high regard for B'Tselem under the new leadership of Haggai Elad. But when I read them say Israel has the right to self-defense, I can't even comprehend it. I can't comprehend it. It doesn't register for me. It doesn't compute. What do you mean self-defense? It's not self-defense. It's people firing fireworks, basically, if you look at the actual damage it's done. It's people launching projectiles, fireworks from a concentration camp. It's basically saying, SOS, help me. SOS, help me. And then you have this crazy question. Does Israel have a right to self-defense? It's kind of lunatic that question can even be posed. Okay, guys. Nice talking to you. We'll be in touch. Between Ben and Jerry. Ben's in London and Jerry's in New York.
Yeah.
Daniel, but yes.
But you're both New Yorkers by habit.
By habit, yes. And Norm, can we get coffee if we're ever in the same?
Yeah, make a point of it. I live down by Coney Island.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever come, where are you in New York?
I'm in Greenpoint.
Oh, well, I know a lot of people in Greenpoint. It's not easy to get from Greenpoint to here unless you bicycle.
I do, yes.
Oh, then it's a hop, skip, and a jump.
Yeah.
So whenever you come down by the beach, just call me beforehand. And if you're a jogger, I jog every day at the beach. So
Absolutely. Thank you, Norm. We very much appreciate it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Norm.
Best of luck to both of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I was nervous that whole time.
Yeah, me too.
Great.
Yeah, that's a great. I was like waiting for the through line to come out, and like clearly it's just the changing perception, which I think is like such a compelling thing to listen to. So
yeah, it was more uplifting of a conversation than I thought it might be.
yeah, me too. Man, he's harsh, but like, really that last statement that he made was so compelling, and I don't know, pierced me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I almost got a little misty-eyed there.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Tragic. You need to go jogging with Norman Finkelstein.
Yeah, gotta make that happen. So fun.
Gotta do it. Well, this has been Villain for All Seasons, and that was Norman Finkelstein coming on graciously to speak with us. I'm Ben.
I'm Dan.
Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week with more adventures, and please like, subscribe, follow us, tweet us, retweet us, comment, shitpost.
Call into the show.
Call into the show. Hate mail, write your senator or congressperson. You got anything else?
Mm-hmm. We put our numbers up on the screen, so give us a call.
Yeah, call into the show. Call into the show. You can get us on WhatsApp or Skype.
Yeah. Voice messages encouraged.
Voice messages. Hashtag us.
Mm-hmm.
Hashtag VFAS podcast. Hashtag Farrakhan.
That would be great if we started coming up in the Farrakhan algorithm.
1 or 2 more episodes, and I feel like we will. It's just like in the Google search, it'll be like Louis Farrakhan related. Well, if that gets Minister Farrakhan's attention.
Yeah. Oh, I do love that we can say Norman Finkelstein is a friend of the show now.
Yes, Norman. Yeah. So thank you again, friend of the show, Norman Finkelstein.
Thank you.